My name is David Enoch, and I teach law and philosophy at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking to you about the situation in Israel today, what all the fuss is about, and also a little bit about what you can do to help. In order to understand what's going on, it's really important to understand some basic things about the idiosyncrasies of Israeli constitutional law. So as you may know, Israel does not have a written constitution. We don't have a two-chamber parliament. We only have the Knesset. We don't have anything resembling a standard, normal separation of powers between the three branches. Our executive has almost full control of the parliament. As a result, the prime minister is much more powerful than typically prime ministers or presidents in other democracies. The only thing we have that even remotely resembles a separation of powers is, or anything like a system of checks and balances, is our court system, our relatively independent court system, and related institutions like that of the Attorney General. So what is all the fuss about? Well, the measures that the government wants to introduce, partly already introduced, target precisely those institutions. One of the things they want is to gain control over the Judicial Appointments Committee, which will get them control over the judiciary. Another thing they are working hard on is curtailing the authority of the Attorney General. If they are successful in these things, we won't have anything resembling a democracy. Now, the unprecedented protests in Israel have had some success, at least in slowing down many of these moves, but these moves are still very much on the table. They're on the table in their most extreme version. So it's not the time to sort of say it's all over. I want to say just a few more words about the reasonableness clause, which you may have heard of. It's a very big deal right now as we're filming this in mid-August. The coalition has passed an amendment to a basic law that curtails the ability of the courts to review administrative decisions. So this is not about judicial review of the legislature. It's about judicial review of the administration. The basic laws are in some respects the closest thing we have to a constitution. So I know that to some people abroad, perhaps mostly to people from the US, it sounds weird that the court can review a constitutional amendment. And our Supreme Court will review this. They will hear the petitions in September. So it's important to realize that while basic laws are in some respects the closest thing we have to a constitution, in others they are nothing like a constitution. Just think about how almost impossibly hard it is to pass a constitutional amendment in the US. In Israel, all that's needed for an amendment to a basic law is one simple majority vote in parliament. That's how the coalition passed this amendment. So it's crucial that the Supreme Court retain its power to review even amendments to basic laws. Now you may wonder, why is the government doing this? And when they're doing this, there are really high prices that are already being paid by the Israeli economy, by the Israeli military, by others as well. What is their motivation for these changes? And because we have a coalition government, different parts of the coalition may be motivated by different considerations. But I think we can say the following. A major part of the coalition are the Jewish Orthodox and even ultra-Orthodox parties. They have more power in this government than they've had in Israel ever before. And they're trying to put this power to use by rendering Israel more Orthodox in some respects and by gaining some privileges for their own population. The Supreme Court in the past has been at least somewhat active in stopping such efforts, and so it's important for them to weaken the court. And as you might expect, whenever this is the kind of stuff that's on the table, women will be the first to pay the price. They already are, in many ways, paying prices. So this is one kind of motivation. There are others. For some parts of the coalition, the main thing is to allow the occupation to go forward in an even less inhibited way than it is as we know it now. For other parts of the coalition, it's about really some kind of government-friendly corruption that will be easier to introduce and maintain without these moderate checks and balances. For Netanyahu, of course, his own trial is a major part of it, and there may be other things here too. There's also another, perhaps more disturbing motivation. For some coalition members, it's about making it about as sure as possible that they cannot be replaced in the next election. They can do that by manipulating election laws, which they can easily do if the courts are much weaker in their abilities to review them. They can also curtail political speech. They've already started doing this. This is why it's important for them to gain control of the media. It's also why it's important for them to gain more control of the universities, because academic freedom and freedom of speech in general are, here as everywhere else, a danger for non-democratic regimes. Now, none of this stuff is speculative. We have declarations, on-the-record declarations of Central Coalition members saying all of these things that I just outlined. So it's really important to understand that when the fight we're fighting now is not just about procedures. It's about anything by way of a chance for Israel to remain a decent liberal democracy. That's what all the fuss is about. Okay, so what should you do about it? First, get better informed. You may want to use such resources as the website of the Israeli Law Professors Forum for Democracy. We'll include the link here somewhere. That's one really important thing. Another thing is that it's important that you support those fighting in Israel and elsewhere for Israeli democracy. And here's another point that I think is important. The fight is already international. The question is not whether it's going to go to the international scene or not. It's there already. A lot of this on the coalition side is being funded by the American Jewish money. The government engages in propaganda outside of Israel at least as much as it does in Israel. So the question is not whether this is going to become international. The question is just whether those supporting democracy are going to show up for the battle. That's where you can be very helpful. Lastly, if you have any kind of relations to Israeli institutions, to Israeli universities, to businesses and so on, support them, but also exert pressure on everyone with any kind of power to use that power, to utilize, to mobilize such power for the fight for Israeli democracy. This is a time of genuine crisis for Israel. Horrible scenarios that we thought of as merely imaginary are now very much in play. If you are a supporter of Israeli democracy, now is the time to do everything within your power to oppose its destruction.